Welcome back to Open Window Politics. Today we're going to be doing a prediction between the former Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. He was the Secretary of Transportation in the Biden administration and is going to be the Democratic challenger in this hypothetical matchup versus J.D. Vance, the current Vice President and most likely Republican frontrunner for the Republican presidential nominee in 2028. So as far as these two candidates goes, J.D. Vance is far more likely to be the Republican Party's nominee than Buttigieg is to be the Democratic Party's nominee, but nonetheless, fun to do a prediction between the two. So Buttigieg kind of rose to fame. He ran for president in 2020, for the Democratic Party's primary in 2020, and he actually did fairly well. He ended up dropping out and endorsing Biden, and then he later got some more experience, served in the Biden administration, as I mentioned earlier, in the Secretary of Transportation position. Buttigieg, before then, he didn't have a ton of experience. He was the mayor of South Bend, Indiana. Now, if I remember correctly, he lives in Michigan. So both him and J.D. Vance have some Rust Belt appeal that will be interesting to analyze when we get to those three states and the crucial key Rust Belt states. But I know these are both well-qualified candidates, and we'll be doing a prediction to see who can end up winning an election. This is hypothetical, just fun to do a prediction. So we're going to start out in the state of Nevada. In Nevada, I see this at the moment going towards the Democrats. I might be willing to put it in, I'll go for it. I'll do lean for the state of Nevada, that it would end up in, I'll do tilt for all the swing states. Tilt for Nevada ending up in Pete Buttigieg's column. This state, I think, will be one of the easier ones to flip back for Democrats. I think Wisconsin would probably be the second most likely, but we'll get to that state later. But Nevada, this state did end up going for Trump in 2024, which was an impressive feat for Trump and the Republicans at large. They also ended up electing a Democratic senator, however, so they've definitely shown some openness for voting for people of varying political parties. So I do think if the election were to be held today, with the national environment definitely favoring Democrats, that it would result in a victory for Buttigieg in the state of Nevada. Arizona, I am a little less confident about. If I had to predict it, I'd probably put it into J.D. Vance's column. I think the state is going to be really interesting to see when we have an election with Trump not as a Republican nominee for president. It'll be interesting to see how someone else, such as his vice president, J.D. Vance, performs. And the state of Arizona, I think, is a situation where J.D. Vance might even be able to do better than Trump. If Trump were to run for this seat, I think he would probably lose it against a more moderate Democrat. But J.D. Vance definitely, compared to Trump, less scandal-ridden, and I think would probably be a better candidate for Republicans to run, so that is going to result in a victory in the state of Arizona. And then I'll go on to the other half of the Sun Belt. We'll end with the Rust Belt. I'm going to start with the district here in Nebraska. I'm going to put that into the lean rating. This district, even went to Harris in 2024, so Democrats are optimistic that they'll be able to win it again in 2028. Only one vote, but every vote counts. And we'll get to the Sun Belt now, the eastern half. So I do think Georgia, I'm going to put Georgia into the Democratic Party's column. The state had some impressive elections for Democrats in 2025 that resulted in many Democratic victories. And the state has a Senate election this year in 2026. That is going to be an interesting one to see if John Ossoff can hold on to his seat. It will be an interesting race to watch. There's also going to be an interesting race to watch in North Carolina for the midterms for this year. Also another Senate seat. So that, as far as North Carolina goes, I'm going to put that into J.D. Vance's column. So that is 16 votes for Buttigieg for Georgia, and then 16 for Vance from North Carolina. So, and then that leaves us really with the key three Rust Belt states. Both candidates are virtually tied, 248 to 246. I'm going to start with Michigan because that's the one I feel the most confident in calling. Pete Buttigieg, if I remember correctly, he lives here now, and he would have some appeal in the state for sure, that this would result in a Democratic Party victory. And then, like I mentioned at the beginning, I do think that Wisconsin also is most likely going to end up in the Democratic Party's column. And then Pennsylvania, I'm on the fence about. Usually the Rust Belt does vote together. I think if Pete Buttigieg were to select like Shapiro or like some candidate that has Democratic candidate that has connections to Pennsylvania and the Rust Belt at large, that it would be easier to call. But for now, I'm going to put it into J.D. Vance's column. I think it's Republicans' most likely shot at winning a swing state if the election were to be held today in the Rust Belt. So don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks.